Research has shown, and most couples would agree, the most challenging year of marriage is the first one. Well, stay with us as we interview an author who has written about this amazing time of marriage. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the session of Living a Godly Marriage. I am Voncille Greene.
And I'm Melvin Greene. And we have as our special guest tonight author Leslie J. Sherrod. Welcome.
Oh, beautiful. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here with you today. Thank you.
And I also wanted to share what makes this a special episode is that Leslie is married to my dear nephew, Brian, and they just had a special celebration. So tell us a little bit about that, Leslie.
Yeah, so Brian and I have been married now for 25 years.
Yay!
Yes, praise God. We celebrated our 25th anniversary actually last June. And so this year we'll be coming up. We're really a couple months away from our 26th year.
Oh,
So I'm
wow,
grateful
that's
for that.
fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
again,
So,
welcome to the show.
so how many children do you have?
We have three children, and it feels odd to call them children now because two of them are really young adults. Our oldest is I have lost track. What year are we in? 2025? So she'll be 24 this year.
Wow.
Wow.
And she actually will be getting married next year.
Oh,
All
cool.
right.
Yes.
Wonderful. How about that?
Yes. And then our son in the middle, he just turned 22 and he graduates next Saturday from college.
Oh, wow.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Yes.
Fantastic.
And then we have the baby of the family who does not feel like a baby anymore because she just turned 17.
Wow.
So they are all just moving along here.
I barely remember 17. I know I was 17 at one time in my life. That was a long, long, long time ago.
Mhm.
Longer for him, though.
Okay, well, let's get into about your writing. How did you start writing novels?
Writing is one of those things that I have always loved to do. Even when I was a child, I would just start writing poems. Some of them were kind of, what you would expect from a teenager. But I also loved writing short stories. But I never imagined that I would actually write a full-length novel until I was in my early 20s. I had just had my oldest at the time. She was just a few months old. At that time, I was a full-time mom, and I just started writing a story. That was 8 novels ago. So I really just started writing a story. I saw a scene in my mind, just started fleshing it out, didn't know what it was going to be, and the next thing I knew, it really turned into a full-length novel. Not that quickly. It did take some time, but it was something that I never imagined doing until I did it, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. That's great. So, so you've written 9 novels, is that what you said? I'm sorry.
8. Yep. I
8.
just had my 8th novel published in November.
Oh,
House.
that's excellent. Now
Yes.
let me ask you a question. What is your process when you're writing? You have children. Is it difficult writing with children in the home?
I will tell you over the course of the years. So when I go back to when my first novel was published, that was 2006. So we're talking about almost 20 years of writing here. There have been seasons where I would write a novel within a year. Then there would be a season where 4 or 5 years would go by and I would not write a single word of a novel. Well, not a completed one. But my process really has been pretty consistent in that I find I'm able to write the most in the middle of the night.
Oh,
especially when my children were young. And now it's a little bit harder because I'm tired. But for whatever reason, it seems like my creative juices really flow more so between like 10 a.m. and 2 a.m. So that was my little pocket of time over the years where I would just, after everyone was settled and the house was quiet, I could just get my laptop and start writing.
Wow, that's amazing
it is.
considering your profession. And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, writing is, I would consider that like my ministry and also my therapy and my hobby. My daytime job, I do work as a psychotherapist. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I have a private practice, really supporting a lot of seniors, caregivers, people who are dealing with stress, depression, anxiety, trauma. So that's what I do full time. And then writing is just kind of plugged in wherever I can fit throughout
Yes,
throughout the
yes.
week.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say it's a ministry. So what is your overall goal or purpose in writing your books?
I would say there's been a lot of different purposes that have come up, but the overarching one, number one, all things to the glory of God.
Yes.
That is my heart's desire. That is my, where my faith comes in is that no matter what I do, and especially with writing, is to really see it as a ministry. Yes, it's supposed to entertain. It's supposed to be something that people can escape into, but when they read the books, my prayer is that they are moved in some way in their spirit. The same way that Jesus used parables to offer really deep truths and wisdom. My hope is that my stories, the stories that I believe that He's given me to share, will in some way inspire, encourage, and teach, but not in a preachy way.
Right.
Really, the goal is for people to be entertained and encouraged at the same time.
And your books are entertaining. And I do have another question for you.
Sure.
Do you have a favorite book that you've written?
Whew, that is a hard one to answer because I would traditionally say my favorite is the one that I'm working on at that moment. But I will tell you something that probably rises to the top, and surprisingly, it's not even necessarily a full-blown novel, but I have a short story that I wrote, and it's published. It's called The Jericho Band.
Oh,
Before I even wrote novels, like I said, I was writing poems, short stories, and I have I like short stories. They pack a little punch in a few words. And The Jericho Band is about it's kind of like historical fiction. It's about a jazz musician who uh, comes into a church community back in the 60s and everything just goes haywire. But it was a fun story to write. And honestly, that probably, as short as it is, I mean, I love reading and writing all of my novels, but that one always has just held a special place in my heart.
now are your short novels, are they on your website? Can people access them through your website, or do they need to go to the bookstore to buy them?
So with all of my work, whether it's the novels or my short stories, you can find links on my website where you can purchase them.
Yes.
For my novels, I do have autographed copies if you're interested in that sort of thing, where you can buy directly from me, and I have that link on my website. Otherwise, I have all the links to like, where they may be sold at Amazon. Some are carried online at Barnes and Noble, some are carried online at Walmart. My short story is also available on Amazon and various other ebook platforms.
Great.
Um,
I'm sorry. What is your website address?
Sure, that would be helpful to know, right? It
Yes.
is my name, LeslieJSherrod.com. So just all spelled out, LeslieJSherrod.com.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get into talking about Housebroken. Tell us about that book, please.
Yeah, so Housebroken was just a fun story to write. It is meant to be a light, fun read that follows the first year of marriage of a young woman named Selena and her husband, Evan. It is really meant to be a comedy, but also with some little lessons in there as well, too. I had a lot of fun writing it. And I've heard from readers who've said that it was a good escape just to get into and laugh. It's not too deep and too heavy, but really it's meant to be a lighthearted, fun read that still kind of gives you some encouragement.
Great.
Well, you're right. It's entertaining, it's fun, but it's also poignant because we noticed you covered a lot of issues that many couples face that first year of marriage. Tell us about some of them.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know a lot of things about the first year of marriage, to be as prepared as possible, recognizing that there's some things you're just not even going to know that you need to know until you're in it, right?
That's true.
Um, and so with Selena, sometimes we think about the big things that we know traditionally can be uh, stumbling blocks in marriage, but sometimes it's the little things, just the act of becoming one, being able to deal with the day to day. Who's doing what in the household? How are you communicating with each other? How are you managing friendships and in-laws and all of the other people that have been part of your life now that you have this unit of two becoming one? So it really kind of looks at a number of different topics. How do you handle transitioning even to parenthood? Is this something that you've talked about as a couple? So just a lot of different things that do come up in the story. Some of them, again, kind of lighthearted, but then when you kind of look at it a little bit more, you're like, this is a little bit more weightier. We need to really think about this.
That's excellent. Yes. So I know when Mel and I first got married, I'd been single for quite some time. And for me, it was a big adjustment waking up with a man in my bed. I think there were times I would scream during the night, but learning that there was somebody in the bed with me,
Mhm.
right?
Right. And
Until,
that, go
right?
ahead. Yes, yes. And that reminds me, I appreciate, we really are, and we've talked about it, the Christian themes, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, that sort of is the underwrites what you're writing. For example, we know Selena had a girlfriend, has probably her best friend,
Mhm.
and there was a discussion in the past about should she stay abstinent till she's married or should she just enjoy herself? And, I really appreciated that you wrote about
Yeah.
Selena's decision to follow God's ways.
Yes.
Mhm.
That is real, isn't it? For a
That's
lot of
really real.
couples.
So
Yes.
you write uncompromisingly, which I really appreciate as well. Yeah. So what inspired you to write that book, Housebroken?
It's interesting. That book really was probably 20 some years in the making. I started it in probably within the first 5 years of my own marriage. And like I said, we just celebrated 26 years, and the book just came out last year. So although I had all of these other novels that I had been working on through the years, I kept coming back to that one. I would have a chapter, I would have another chapter, then I realized I had half the book, and so it's one of those things where I've even as when I was younger, I've always just been fascinated by the whole idea and concept of marriage, of relationships, and I think it helped lead me to the desire of myself that I wanted to get married and have this family, and so just kind of tackling that theme again in just a lighthearted way was important to me. The story is not at all autobiographical. I need to say that because a lot happens in this story, but it was just a way to be able to tackle some of those things that we see can come up with marriage. Regardless of your background, regardless of what has happened or what choices you have made, my hope is that there's the reality that there is always hope. And communication is really the cornerstone.
Could you talk about some of the common challenges that couples meet in their first year of marriage?
Sure. I think, you have to talk about, things like finances,
Yeah.
um, things, think about how your work schedule and what happens when you're getting off of work. Is everyone just kind of coming home and collapsing? Are you talking with each other? Do you need space? there is definitely an adjustment where, if you've been living your life and doing your own thing, and now you have to figure out how does this look with someone else in my life on a day-to-day, in my face,
Right.
type of reality,
Yes.
right? Where simple things of how you like your home set up. What dinners do you like? Who's fixing the dinner?
The temperature.
There's a lot of things to really work through.
Yes.
Right, that's true. In
That's true.
fact, one of the things that we liked about the novel is Evan being a budding lawyer,
Mhm,
and yet right away he gets a case and he's spending a lot of time working.
mhm,
That's a common problem, not just the first year of marriage, but throughout marriage,
Right.
especially if things are not going as planned.
mhm,
We find that husbands tend to focus on the job, and the wife tends to focus on the.
Children.
That's
Their
right.
children.
So we're glad you talked about that because that's
That's
those
real.
are both issues
Yeah.
that couples face a lot. So what do you want readers to learn from your book, Housebroken?
Well, one thing that I did want readers to learn, and I think this is especially for true for women or true for anyone. I think especially when you've grown up in the church, there's this tendency to just have this thought that if I follow X, Y, and Z, and I obey the Lord in this, and I do this and that, that somehow or the other that equates to now I'm just going to have this perfect marriage.
That's
Um, the reality is there are going to be storms. You have two imperfect people trying to now make a perfect union, right? There's going to be challenges, there's going to be barriers. And guess what? Everyone has their past. Regardless of what decisions you have made or what you have gone through, you're coming into this union bringing in all of those things, right? So the message is that there's hope. Communication is key. That the foundation of your faith has to be strong and steady through the storms, so that you can not only function as a couple, but that you can still thrive in your individual, spiritual, emotional, healthy ways of growth, right? So just really, if I was going to boil this down to one lesson, is really to think about what your foundation is as you're going into a marriage and as you're trying to make it happen and make it work.
That's so true. In fact, in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus talks about a wise man building on the rock, that is, obeying God's word, and the foolish man building on the sand. Because you're right, Leslie, the storms will come, and Jesus talks about that.
Yes.
And those storms test the foundation that you have built your marriage upon. Also, it reminds me of Psalm 127, verse 1, which is, unless
The
the
Lord
Lord
builds
builds
the
the
house.
house, the laborers
Labor
build in
vain.
vain.
Yeah.
And what that vain can mean is that that foundation is not going to last. It's going to be hopeless. It's
Yes.
going to end in as Jesus described, the house falling down, a great crash. And more importantly, God's reputation will be damaged. So this is something we learned from our first marriages. So we decided to get premarital counseling. We decided to build on God's ways. In fact, we like to say God was the architect of marriage. The
Mhm.
Bible are his blueprints. The Holy Spirit is his foreman, which points back to the blueprints and the architect. And
Yes.
also, Jesus is the cornerstone
Cornerstone.
of the marriage. So
Yes.
that's a successful formula. So again, we really appreciate you writing about those in an entertaining way, but also, like you mentioned, a non-preaching way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And as you were speaking, I love how you bring in the analogy about building. And that ties even in with the story Housebroken, because all of the happenings that occur in this story also happen within the context of a wedding gift from her parents
Yes.
of a fixer-upper. That's probably being generous, calling it a fixer-upper. They've been gifted this home, this money pit of a home that they need to somehow build up. And the progression of that building parallels also the progression of them building this marriage together.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Excellent.
that's beautiful. And I love again we loved how you tied that together. It's
Yes.
definitely all right. So let's talk about you being a writer and Voncille.
So, what advice would you give someone who aspires to become a writer?
The first thing I would say is to not give up. And I say that because writing can have its hills and its valleys. Um,
Yes.
it can be a very solitary journey. Find people that you can connect with, a writing group, some kind of community. It's important because the act of writing itself, you're sitting there, most likely by yourself somewhere, whether it's with a notebook or a computer, lost in your own thoughts, right? But there are so many stages and phases of writing, whether you're just trying to get out a first draft or you're working through editing or you're trying to get it published or you're wanting an agent. There's so many steps and levels and phases that at any point in the journey, it's easy to get discouraged. So the rule number one to writing is to not give up. Recognize it may not be an immediate process. It could be months, it could be years in the making. You still don't give up. That's really the biggest thing that I can tell anyone who is feeling that pull in their heart of wanting to write and get their story out there. Stay with it. The world needs to hear your voice and
Mm.
the story that only you can tell in the way that you can do it. So find your community and keep writing.
That's great. Excellent.
That is so true. And a lot of times you can tell your story through your writing. And it reminds me again of the verse that people are saved by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony or the word of your story. And it's just incredible to me that in that verse you have the blood of the Lamb, what Jesus did, and the word of your testimony in the same verse, which
Mhm.
says something about how important it is to God.
Mhm.
And it's certainly more important to your writers or your viewers
Mhm.
because it's a opportunity for you to share what Christ means in your life. So that's good.
Just get free counseling.
Right,
It's a
right.
great, great book.
And I also wanted to share, go back to something that you shared before, which is it takes time to do it. It's no rush. You don't have to sit down and just write, 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 write. So tell us a little bit more about that. How long, for example, does it typically take you to write a book?
It has really varied, and I do mean that. I think the quickest turnaround I had for a rough draft, and I'm talking like the very first basic, very rough draft, might have been a few months. And then I've had some books like this one where I have worked over it over the course of almost 2 decades. Each story has its own story for me. And they tend to kind of reflect a different stage or season in my life. My earlier books, they probably would not be written now if I was going to sit down and try and do it. Based on life experiences and interests and what had my attention at the moment. And then that's okay. I think it's okay to recognize that, we all go through different seasons, and the story that you have today might not be the same one that you had 5 years ago.
Mm,
And that's okay. Go ahead and write the story that is here today. So for me, it has really been, like I said earlier, a different story for each story.
okay. And I also wanted to mention Brian's input.
Yes, I was just gonna ask
For
him.
husbands,
Yes,
that's so important
yeah,
that though your wife is your helpmeet, you also are to help and support her. God has given her gifts to be used for his glory as well. So tell us how Brian has helped and supported you.
that's
He has been the biggest cheerleader, the biggest helper. the biggest supporter, I will say, through this entire journey. He has given me space and time to write, especially when our children were younger. He would, just help out with so many things so that I could even have the physical time to do this. He also is an artist. So he has done, I think, all but one of my novels. He created the cover for through the different publishers that I've had, both traditional and self-publishing. He was able to actually be the cover designer. So he has been supportive not only in word and in spirit, but in action. And I'm grateful I'm just grateful that God allowed me to marry one of his kings, who has just been, I can't even begin to tell you just like how supportive he is.
Oh, that's great.
That's
That's great.
important.
Yes.
Yes.
I know when I approached Voncille about doing what we're doing now, talk
This is
about
not something I would have chosen to do myself. He's a good talker. I married him, so.
and a better prayer.
Well, yes, you do. And I appreciate your prayers. I need them. I know that. I recognize that in
And I
myself.
need yours too.
Yes, I do pray for you as well, sweetie.
Yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
do.
But see, that's sometimes we ask couples, do you believe God has brought you together? And of course, they normally say yes. And we said, have you asked them what you can do together to serve Him? Because it may be the ministry is for both of you all, and you can do it greater working together as a team. Together, each accomplishes more. And they say no. And so we encourage them, seek God about that, because in the different seasons of your marriage, it could be God is calling you to serve Him in a way that you hadn't thought about the two of you working together,
Yeah.
whether it's ushering together in church or singing in a choir together. But I will say this, having Voncille to support and work with me has been such a blessing to our relationship and also our joint relationship with Christ.
Yeah. And it's not something that I would have chosen to do, but we have to compromise in marriage a lot.
Yes,
And I know it's important to him, so what's important to him is important to me as well.
right.
Yeah.
So as we come down the home stretch, what final words would you like to give to aspiring authors?
No, I can't stress enough the idea of staying encouraged. I say that because I've had to deal with my own levels of discouragement through this writing journey for different reasons. And everybody's reasons will look different, right? But the idea that you have to keep writing, you have to find people that you can connect with. It doesn't have to be a really big crew. It could just be one or two other buddies or friends that are going through their own writing journeys who understand that process. Get as much knowledge as you can. Don't be afraid of critiques. Don't be afraid to edit. And don't be afraid to start your story. Sometimes people say they have a story they want to write and they've been saying this for years. And, for whatever reason, I know life comes up and things come in the way, but sometimes it's fear. Give yourself permission to just start a first draft. It does not have to be perfect. It does, in fact, it's going to be a first draft. Like, get in your mind, it's going to go through its revisions, but give yourself permission to just start a first draft.
Could I just jump in here for a minute?
Sure.
It's been wonderful talking with you. The time has just flown by so quickly. And we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
that you share with us. It's been food for our souls, right?
Yes.
And I know others will benefit from this as well.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. Thank you for the invitation.
And as we always like to close, living a godly marriage is the best marriage.
It is. I love you.